All right, let's do this. Time for a deep dive into something pretty cool. Lynn Lundquist's book, Learning Spoken English, in half the time.
It's a good one.
So you're listening to this because you want to master spoken English. And quickly, right?
Right.
Well, Lundquist's approach, it's all about retraining the way your mouth feels to get those English sounds right.
It really is.
We're talking about something called a proprioceptive sense. Honestly, it's kind of mind-blowing.
Most language learning is so focused on just the mental stuff, like vocab, grammar, all.
Yeah.
But Lundquist, he makes this case that fluency, being able to speak well, it's just as much physical as it is mental.
Okay, so how does that work?
It's about creating this feedback loop between your brain and your mouth.
A feedback loop.
Yeah, like a loop.
All right, so break this down for me and for our listener. In the book, you use this comparison to machines, right?
I do.
Explain that, this whole open loop versus closed loop system thing.
Okay, so picture this. You've got a simple sprinkler system, the kind that runs on a timer.
I've got one.
That's open loop. It just goes on its schedule. Doesn't matter if the lum's already soaked.
Mine does that, yeah. Wastes so much water.
Now imagine a sprinkler that's got a moisture sensor.
Okay, fancy.
That's closed loop. It's getting information back, feedback, and it changes what it's doing based on that.
So it only waters when it needs to.
Exactly. Way more efficient.
Okay, I get the sprinklers. But what's that got to do with my mouth trying to speak English?
Because your speech, it's a closed loop system too. Think about it. Your brain sends the signals to your mouth.
Yeah.
You make sounds, your ears hear them. But there's more going on than just that.
More.
You also feel what your tongue's doing, your lips, even your breath, and all that. That's the proprioceptive sense. It's like this constant stream of info going back to your brain telling it, hey, you put too much tongue on that sound, fix it next time.
Wait, so I don't just need to, memorize words. My mouth literally has to learn the right feeling of English sounds.
Exactly.
It's like muscle memory, but for my tongue.
That's a great way to put it. And Lundquist's point is that most ways of teaching English, they totally skip over this.
Really?
You can do grammar drills for years, but if your mouth hasn't been trained to physically make English sounds, you won't be fluent.
That makes a lot of sense, but kind of scary too. I've had that. Where I know the word, but it comes out all wrong.
I know what you mean.
Like my mouth's got its own ideas.
It happens. So how do we fix this?
Yeah, how do we fix this?
That's where Lundquist's method comes in. He's got some pretty strict rules.
Strict? Like what?
One of the biggest. You have to actually speak aloud when you're practicing.
Out loud. No more like reading silently.
Nope. You got to get that whole brain-mouth air loop going. All of it. Working together.
I could see what he's getting at. But you said Lundquist is all about this proprioceptive stuff, right?
Right.
But doesn't some grammar knowledge have to help too? What does he say about that?
He says real grammar understanding, it comes from actually using the language.
Not just knowing the rules.
Not just the rules, no. By getting that feedback constantly, you internalize the rules way better than just memorizing them.
Huh. That's interesting. So it's more like learning to swim by jumping in the pool, not just reading about it.
I like that. But hold on, there's more to it than just talking randomly, right?
Right.
So what else is important in his method? Repetition, for one thing. It's huge. Think of it like you're practicing scales on a piano.
Okay.
You're building the pathways in your brain for those English sounds specifically, and Lundquist is really, really serious about this. You can't make mistakes while you're practicing.
Whoa. No mistakes allowed.
That's where things get a little controversial.
Yeah, that sounds tough. I feel like sometimes I learn by messing up. How does he say that works?
He argues that if you make mistakes early on, those are the hardest to unlearn.
Oh, interesting.
It's about building the perfect patterns right from the start, even if it means going super slow. He compares it to athletes training for their sport. They need those exact movements ingrained early on.
So it's not that mistakes are bad. It's that in this initial training, he's laser focused on those perfect foundations.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay. Now this is a wild one. Lundquist throws out the whole idea of beginner and advanced levels.
He does, yeah.
Why? How does that work?
He says there's just one spoken English. There are just different degrees of how fluent you are in it. Doesn't matter if you're starting out or you've studied for years, you're working with the same sounds, the same sentence structures.
That's actually really encouraging,
It is.
Especially if you feel stuck at a certain level. But okay, so it's about retraining your mouth. We get that. But what does that look like in practice?
Lundquist has these unique ideas about using newspapers as language learning tools.
Newspapers?
Yeah, newspapers.
Okay.
We'll get into the details in a bit, but the main idea is newspapers are full of authentic English, the way people actually use it.
Right. So I'm not just reading to understand the news. I'm using the articles to get my mouth and my brain used to how English really flows.
Exactly. You're reading out loud, marking new words, even playing around with those expressions to see how they work.
It's like a workout.
It is for your language skills.
Okay, so we're reading aloud, marking new words, and we're language detectives or something.
I like it.
This is starting to make sense. But before we get to those newspaper techniques, you mentioned something about verb drills.
I did. Lundquist has this whole system for them.
He's got a system for everything.
He does. He's got these 4 types of spoken verb drills. They might sound a bit technical, but they're all about training your mouth to just automatically use those tricky verb forms without even thinking about it.
All right, now I'm intrigued. So we've got this no mistakes rule, newspapers as training grounds. This is starting to sound less like a language course and more like a secret agent training program.
Well, it is about retraining your whole system to handle English, almost like you're building a new skill from scratch.
That's wild. And one of the coolest things is it makes you realize how complex something we take for granted, like talking, really is. I mean, we forget that language is this incredible thing. Our brain, mouth, ears, all coordinating.
It really is.
Like a symphony happening every time we open our mouths.
Exactly. And Lundquist's method. It's all about fine-tuning that symphony, making sure every instrument is playing perfectly in harmony.
Okay, we've laid some groundwork here. Now I want to get into the details.
Let's do it.
These verb drills, what are they all about and how do they work? I bet our listeners are curious about that too.
All right. They're called A drills, sentence completion drills, B drills, and tense-person selection drills.
Oh boy.
Don't worry, they're not as scary as they sound.
Okay.
Each one targets a different part of how we master verbs. And super important, are all done by speaking out loud.
Spoken verb drills. This sounds intense. I gotta admit, verb conjugations always got me in school. Like, I was just memorizing these endless tables. How is Lundquist's method different?
It's not about memorizing, it's about training your mouth, so it just makes the right forms naturally. Like take the A drills. You have this list of verbs, and you practice saying them in all their forms, out loud, clear pronunciation, the right rhythm, all that.
So instead of writing it out, I walk, you walk, he walks. I'm actually saying it. Sounds kind of basic, but yeah, I can see how they'd use my mouth more than just staring at a page.
That's it. You're building those proprioceptive connections we talked about. Now, sentence completion drills, those are a little trickier.
Oh, no.
You get a sentence, but it's got a blank space. You got to fill in the right verb form based on what the sentence is saying.
So it's like a little puzzle. I got to figure out, is it past tense, singular or plural? But I'm doing it all out loud, so I'm not just thinking about the grammar rules. I'm practicing how correct English actually sounds.
You got it. And then there are B drills, all about switching between different persons and tenses. Fast.
Okay, speed around.
You might get a prompt like, walk, third person plural, past tense. And you got to say, they walked right away.
So it's like a workout for my verb brain and my mouth. I'm starting to see how this whole system works together. But what about that fourth one? Tense person selection. What's the deal with that?
Oh, that one's clever. Lundquist gives you a base verb and then a bunch of sentences, all with blanks. You have to scan each sentence, figure out the tense, the person, and then say the right form. No writing it down.
Wow, so it really makes you think on your feet, like using those verb patterns you've been practicing.
Exactly. It all ties together.
This is making me realize how much actually goes into speaking a language, right? It's not just knowing words, it's this whole crazy dance between your brain and your mouth.
Yeah.
It really is like learning a sport. You can't just know the rules, you got to train your body.
Great analogy. And that's why Lundquist is so insistent about not making mistakes while you're practicing. In the beginning, your mouth is literally learning a new skill, just like an athlete learning a new move. Bad habits are hard to break, especially with pronunciation.
That no mistakes rule is definitely a different way of thinking about things, but I get it. If I keep messing up the same sound, I'm basically training my mouth to be bad at English.
It's counterintuitive, but it's true. And it makes you realize there's real physical effort in speaking another language well.
Okay, I'm with you on the verb drills, but I'm still super curious about those newspaper techniques you mentioned.
Yeah.
How does Lundquist turn reading the news into a proprioceptive workout?
It's all about making passive reading into active practice. He says, first, choose articles about stuff you actually find interesting.
Makes sense. If I'm bored, I'm not going to put in the effort.
Right. Find something that grabs you. Then it's time to read out loud.
Out loud again.
This might feel weird at first, especially you're not used to it. But the key is to focus on each sound. Like really try to copy the rhythm, the intonation of natural speech. You're giving your mouth a workout.
So it's almost like I'm shadowing a native speaker, but instead of listening, I'm using the text as my guide.
You got it. And as you're reading, Lundquist says to mark any new words or phrases you come across.
Okay.
Keep a vocab notebook. Write down definitions, example sentences, whatever helps you remember.
So I'm not just trying to get the gist of the article, I'm really digging into the language, breaking it down.
That's it. You're a language detective. Newspapers are full of clues.
Okay. Reading aloud, marking words, language detective work, anything else. What other tricks does Lundquist have?
He's big on cognates, words that have a shared origin between English and your native language.
Oh, okay.
Recognizing those can help you learn new words faster and understand how words connect across different languages.
That's super helpful, especially when it feels like there are a million words to learn. But what about grammar? Do newspapers help with that too?
They do. Lundquist says, take those long, complicated sentences you find in a news article and broke them down.
Break them down.
See the different grammatical structures they use. How are the clauses connected? How are they using tenses? How does word order affect the meaning?
So I'm not just reading for info, I'm actively trying to figure out how the language works.
Like taking a car engine apart.
Whoa.
Seeing how each piece makes the whole thing run. And newspapers, they give you tons of engines to play with.
I like that. It's like you're taking something complex and breaking it down to understand it.
And you're doing it all with real English, not textbook stuff. You're learning the way native speakers actually use it.
This is making me want to grab a newspaper right now. But before I do, I have a question about that no mistakes thing again. How does that work with the newspaper technique? Is it okay to mess up when I'm just reading to myself?
Lundquist is all about forming good habits right from the start. Even reading aloud alone, you're still training your mouth, your brain. So yeah, you might stumble over a word or two, but try to be as accurate as you can.
So it's about paying attention even when I'm by myself. Like, how am I saying these words?
You got it. It's like you developing this little speech coach in your head, a voice that's saying, hold on, that didn't sound quite right. Try it again. It might feel a little annoying at first, but it makes a big difference in the long run.
I see how everything fits together now.
It does, yeah.
The verb drills, using newspapers, this no mistakes idea. It's all about creating this, structured, supportive way for my mouth to learn English properly.
It's a system that's almost designed to make you succeed.
And Lundquist also talks about having a language partner or a teacher.
He does, someone to give you feedback.
So it's not just solo practice. It's about having someone point out those little mistakes I might miss.
Exactly. A good language partner, they can help you refine your pronunciation, fix grammar errors, even give you those cultural insights you might not pick up on your own.
This makes me realize learning a language is really a team effort.
It is.
You need that back and forth, the feedback, the shared journey.
Couldn't agree more. And Lundquist's method gives you a framework for that, whether it's with a teacher, a language partner, or even just other learners who are going through the same thing.
It's inspiring, honestly. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing I want to touch on. Lundquist talks about mindset, motivation, that kind of stuff. What are his thoughts on that part of language learning?
He knows learning a language is tough. It takes dedication, discipline. You got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. But he's also really big on finding the joy in it all.
The joy.
Yeah, embracing the challenge, celebrating those little wins, not being scared to make mistakes.
It's easy to get bogged down in the rules, the vocab lists, pronunciation. But language learning should be something good, something that makes you feel good, right?
It should be. Lundquist wants people to be curious, enthusiastic, approach it like an adventure, he reminds us. Fluency isn't the finish line, it's the whole journey.
I love that. It's not about reaching some random endpoint. It's about everything along the way, the learning, the growing, connecting with a new language and culture.
That's where Lundquist's method really works. It gives you the structure, the support for that journey, but it also says your own drive matters, and so does having a positive attitude.
It's about finding those things that keep you interested, those things that make you want to keep learning, keep exploring.
It's about making language part of your life, not just another thing on your to-do list.
And that is beautiful. Lundquist's method isn't just teaching you English. It's about creating a love for language, this desire to connect with the world and believing that you can succeed.
Unlocking a whole world of new possibilities.
And that is something to celebrate.
It is.
Okay, so this has been a lot to take in, really cool ideas.
Yeah.
For our listener out there, if they're feeling inspired, where should they start? What's one piece of advice to get them going with Lundquist's method?
I'd say start by paying attention to how your mouth feels when you speak.
Like right now?
Yeah. Really focus on those tiny movements of your tongue, your lips, your breath. That awareness is the basis of everything Lundquist teaches. And it's something you can do right this second, no matter what level you're at.
It's like we're giving our listener a superpower, the ability to feel their way to fluency.
That's a good way to put it.
But remember, everyone, this is a journey, not a race.
Right.
Be patient with yourself. Celebrate those small wins.
And have fun.
I think Lundquist would like that. Have fun. This deep dive has been amazing.
It has.
This method, it's so different, so smart, and honestly so encouraging.
It is. It gives you that feeling that you can do it.
And to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into spoken English. Remember, fluency is totally possible. Embrace the challenge, and let that joy of language learning be your guide.
Happy learning.
You know, what I'm really liking about Lundquist's method is how complete it feels.
Yeah.
It's not just memorize this grammar or copy this pronunciation.
Right.
It's like you understand how speech works, you train your body, you got to have the right mindset. He's thought of everything.
It is pretty comprehensive, and that's part of why it works so well, I think.
It really takes into account how complex learning a language is. But I'm guessing some people, when they first hear about it, they might get a little intimidated.
I could see that.
Especially that no mistakes rule. That's so different from how we usually learn things. What would you say to someone who's like, I don't know if I can do this Lundquist thing because of that rule?
I get it. We're so used to thinking mistakes are bad, like they mean you failed.
Right.
But Lundquist flips that around.
Flips it how?
He sees mistakes as information. Like, okay, this is what's not working yet, so let's adjust. It's a chance to get better, understand more.
So it's not about being perfect on day one.
Nope.
It's about using that early practice time to really get those correct patterns down solid.
Exactly. You're setting yourself up to win by building that strong base. And remember, that no mistakes thing, it's mostly for those drills, those exercises where you're zeroing in on a specific skill.
Ah, okay.
Once you've got that foundation, you can experiment more, be more free with how you express yourself.
That makes sense. Like if you were learning an instrument,
Yeah.
you wouldn't just jump in trying to play a jazz solo, right?
Right.
You'd spend time on scales, chords, building up that muscle memory, training your ear.
Great analogy.
And once you have that foundation, the mistakes you make are less about getting the basics wrong and more about playing with the language, testing things out, finding your own style.
Exactly. You get to the point where you're exploring those little nuances, pushing your limits.
So mistakes aren't bad in themselves. It's about when they happen, what kind they are in the learning process.
Precisely. That's a really important point for anyone who's hesitant to try Lundquist's method. It's not about being perfect.
Okay.
It's about being careful, paying attention, practicing with purpose.
And honestly, it's got to be about having fun too, right?
Absolutely.
That's something we forget sometimes when we're learning a language. We get so stuck on the grammar, the vocab, the pronunciation.
I know what you mean.
But it should be enjoyable.
It should be. And Lundquist gets that. He reminds us that language is a tool. It's for connecting with people, expressing yourself, learning about new stuff, new cultures.
It shouldn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. He wants people to approach it with curiosity, with excited, a sense of adventure. Fluency isn't the end goal. It's the whole trip you take to get there.
That's such a good way to look at it. It's not about reaching some finish line. It's about all the stuff that happens along the way. Learning, growing, connecting with the language and the people who speak it.
And that's where Lundquist's method shines, I think. It gives you the structure, the support for that journey, but it also reminds you that your own motivation, having a positive attitude, that stuff matters.
It's about finding the things that keep you interested, the things that make you want to keep going, keep learning.
Making language part of your life, not just another task to check off.
And honestly, that is beautiful. Lundquist isn't just teaching English. He's teaching you how to love language. That desire to connect with the world, believing that you can actually do this, you can succeed.
It opens up so much.
It does. And that's what's so great about this deep dive into Lundquist's method. It's not just about English. It's about learning how to learn anything, pushing ourselves further than we thought we could, and finding joy in the process.
It's been great talking about all this with you.
Same here. And to our listener, we hope you've loved this deep dive into spoken English. Remember, fluency is absolutely possible.
It is.
Embrace the challenge. Let that joy of learning be your compass.
Happy learning, everyone.